Well, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is calling on the Prime Minister to raise the Canadian flag during Remembrance Week. Of course, flags on the Peace Tower in Ottawa and on federal buildings have been lowered since May after the discovery of unmarked graves at former residential schools in Kamloops, British Columbia. Joining us live to discuss his position on this issue is Opposition Leader Erin O'Toole. Mr. O'Toole, thanks for joining us here on CB24 Breakfast this morning. So what exactly is it you're calling on the Prime Minister to do here?
Well, now is the time to raise the flag again. As you know, Nick, the flags have been at half-mast in Canada for over 5 months. It's unprecedented. It was appropriate that they were lowered after the discovery in Kamloops, the reminder of the terrible tragedy of residential schools in our history. But Mr. Trudeau put no parameters, no protocol around having the flag come back up. He missed the window following the first day of Truth and Reconciliation because, as you know, he went to Tofino and it became about him, unfortunately. Well, now the next window to make sure it's up is for Remembrance Day. And I think we can have both a commitment to reconciliation and to remembrance, particularly for the thousands of Indigenous veterans who are celebrated on November 8th as part of Remembrance Week.
Yeah, it's a particularly difficult and sensitive issue based on, of course, the findings at the residential schools and the expectation. I mean, they're still doing ground-penetrating radar at other residential schools across the country, potentially going to be finding more. What is the reaction been, and what are the discussions you've had personally with Indigenous leaders about the idea that perhaps now is the time to do this? What have they said to you?
Well, everyone wants to make sure that no one forgets the tragedy of residential schools. And that's why the calls to action, there are 71 to 76 of the Truth and Reconciliation Report, are about former school sites, about missing children. There's also a call to action to have a national monument permanently in Ottawa. Conservative opposition, we support all that. And what we'd like to see is actually concrete action on reconciliation. And I think Mr. Trudeau's prolonged symbolism is not a substitute for concrete action. So most of the Indigenous leaders I've spoke to in the last few weeks think it's time for the flag to come up. I spoke to one who is a veteran himself, is a member of his own Legion, a very distinguished Indigenous leader, who said, I want to see the flag up so that we can have the proper protocols for remembrance. So I think this is the time, let's do it, and I'm glad there's a lot of voices, everyone doing it respectfully, because we can remember and we can reconcile as well.
So let's play this out here. If the flags are raised for Remembrance Day, then of course they get lowered in memory of the sacrifices of Canadian soldiers and veterans. Should they then remain lowered after Remembrance Day, or are you calling for them to go back up after that? Because of course there's the Remembrance Week, Remembrance Day, and then there's beyond that. What do you want to see beyond that at this point?
I would like to see us return to normal protocol with our flag. This is the most important national symbol, Nick. It brings us together here at home. It's respected around the world, and there's normally protocols. I'm in Toronto today for the funeral of Bill Davis. Normally, when a former premier like that passes, the flag on the Peace Tower in Ottawa is lowered. That can't be done because it's been permanently lowered. We've had days where police officers who die in the line of duty are normally honored. That can't be done because we've been in this prolonged period that is quite unprecedented. So I think that symbolism is important, but concrete action on reconciliation is more important. And I think we need to return to normal with the flag as soon as possible and recommit to the calls to action that will actually show Indigenous peoples that we're committed to the long-term well-being of all Canadians and to the calls to action for reconciliation.
Okay. Later this month, of course, Parliament is going to reconvene after the election. It's 2 months beyond the election date. But I want to ask you about your MP specifically and the vaccination protocols. We had on CTV Question Period this weekend, former Prime Minister, Conservative leader Brian Mulroney, who of course was out campaigning with you. He said that this would be a no-brainer to him, that he would require all of his MPs to roll up their sleeves and get vaccinated. Is that something that you will consider now?
Well, we will have all MPs in the House of Commons on November 22nd participating vaccinated. As I've always said, Nick, and I said probably 10,000 times in the election, vaccines are a critical tool. They're safe. I encourage everyone to get vaccinated. And I think we can tackle questions people have, any hesitation, without turning it into an us versus them. So that has been the approach our caucus has taken. We're going to respect all the rules, all the laws, and I think this is the way we tackle that remaining 10 to 15% of people that have some degree of hesitancy.
What is your top priority going in to the next couple of weeks as Parliament does resume?
It's the cost of living, inflation, and really what we're seeing is people not being able to afford to live here in the GTHA. You know, we are seeing inflation at 20-year highs. We're seeing supply chain shortages. People can't get cars fixed. Factories are stopping. There's a semiconductor shortage, and we're not working with the United States on that. So families aren't seeing their wages go up, but they're seeing inflation make everything more expensive. So that's what we have to do, get the government's spending under control, work with the U.S. on supply, and be more resilient here in what we make here in Canada.
Okay, that's Conservative Leader Erin O'Toole joining us this morning on CP24 Breakfast. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.